caught a burglar, and what we did to him made even the cops start laughing. I was flipping burgers at my summer barbecue when Mrs. Kowalski's cat literally threw itself through her closed kitchen window. Not near the window. Through the window. Glass exploded everywhere, and this orange tabby landed in her flower bed screeching like it had seen the devil himself. 20 of us just froze mid-conversation and stared, because cats don't just kamikaze through windows for no reason. Then we heard a man inside Mrs. Kowalski's house scream, "What the hell?" followed by the loudest crash I've ever heard that wasn't a car accident. Mrs. Kowalski, who was standing right next to me holding a plate of potato salad, dropped the entire thing on the ground and whispered, "I live alone." That's when my roommate Gavin, who was already 6 beers deep and shirtless for some reason, grabbed the metal barbecue spatula, held it up like a sword, and yelled, "Who wants to be a hero?" before sprinting full speed toward her back door. 4 other drunk guys immediately chased after him, screaming various battle cries, and I just stood there thinking this was either the dumbest or greatest thing I'd ever witness. But here's where it gets weird. As Gavin reached Mrs. Kowalski's back door, it flew open from the inside, and a guy in all black came running out carrying a pillowcase full of stuff. He was wearing a ski mask in the middle of July and didn't see Gavin until the last possible second. They collided at full speed, and the burglar's pillowcase exploded on impact, sending jewelry and electronics flying through the air in slow motion. A laptop hit the fence, rings scattered across the grass, and Gavin, who'd somehow held onto his spatula during the collision, just laid there on top of the burglar yelling, "I've captured him! I've actually captured him!" The burglar tried to scramble away, but Derek tackled him from the side with a pool noodle, which shouldn't have worked but absolutely did, because the burglar slipped on Mrs. Kowalski's wet grass and went down hard. My cousin Felix, who'd grabbed a bag of charcoal for reasons nobody understood, just dumped the entire thing on the guy's head. The burglar was now covered in black dust, coughing and blind, and that's when Julian appeared out of nowhere holding a massive watermelon above his head, like the boulder from Indiana Jones. Time actually seemed to slow down as Julian wound up his throw. Everyone watching started yelling different things. "Don't do it! Do it! That's evidence! Throw it!" The burglar looked up through his charcoal-covered ski mask just in time to see 20 pounds of watermelon flying directly at his face. The impact sounded like a cartoon sound effect. The watermelon exploded. The burglar went down, and Julian just stood there with his arms raised in victory yelling, "Watermelon justice!" The burglar wasn't knocked out, just absolutely covered in fruit chunks and charcoal dust, laying on his back making sounds like a broken accordion. Gavin stood over him with the spatula pointed at his chest and said, completely seriously, "You've been grilled, criminal." Mrs. Kowalski walked over, looked down at this disaster of a human being on her lawn, and started laughing so hard she had to sit down on the grass. She was crying, laughing, couldn't breathe, just pointing at him and wheezing. The burglar tried to say something, but his mouth was full of watermelon, so it came out as, legal, Someone yelled that we should call the police, and I pulled out my phone, but before I could even unlock it, my girlfriend Natasha came running out of my house holding the biggest roll of plastic wrap I'd ever seen, the industrial kind we'd bought for covering food at the party. She had this absolutely manic look in her eyes and yelled, "Secure the suspect," like she was in a cop show. Before anyone could process what was happening, she started wrapping the burglar's legs together while he was still lying there covered in charcoal and fruit. She wrapped around and around and around, and the burglar was too shocked and winded to even fight back. He just kept saying, "Wait, what? What is this? What's happening?" in this confused, defeated voice. Derek immediately understood the assignment and started wrapping the guy's arms to his torso. Then Felix found another roll of plastic wrap in my kitchen, and they just kept going. Within 3 minutes, this burglar looked like a human burrito, just his head sticking out, completely immobilized, covered in black dust and watermelon chunks, lying on Mrs. Kowalski's lawn while 20 drunk people stood around watching like this was normal. But then it got weirder because Gavin suggested we take him to the front yard to wait for police, and 6 guys just picked him up like a log and carried him. The burglar was screaming the whole way, yelling about his rights and lawyers and illegal detention, but Gavin just kept spatula tapping his head saying, "Shh, you're under citizen's arrest." Very legal. Very cool. They propped him up against my fence like a decoration, and that's when people started getting really creative. Mrs. Kowalski's daughter posted the photo to social media with the caption, "Neighborhood Watch actually works," and within 10 minutes it had 500 likes. My neighbor Ashley brought the burglar a plate of food and tried to hand feed him a burger, asking if he wanted cheese. He just stared at her in complete horror and said, "I want a lawyer." But Ashley just shrugged and said, "We don't have lawyers, but we have really good potato salad." The absurdity of the situation was escalating by the second. Someone turned the music back up. People were taking selfies with the plastic-wrapped burglar, and he just sat there having the worst day of his entire criminal career. Then my other neighbor, Mr. Pacheco, walked over to see what the commotion was about. He looked at the scene, didn't even seem surprised, and walked right up to the burglar's face. "You," he said, pointing aggressively. "You're the one who broke into my house 3 weeks ago. I recognize that stupid beanie." He pulled out his phone and showed the burglar security footage of someone in the exact same outfit breaking his window. The burglar's eyes went huge and he started shaking his head frantically, but Mr. Pacheco wasn't done. He turned to all of us and said, "This guy stole my wife's necklace, her grandmother's necklace." We filed a police report and everything. The energy shifted immediately. This wasn't just a random burglar anymore. This was the burglar who'd been terrorizing our neighborhood for weeks. People started pulling out their phones and checking their own security footage. Within 5 minutes, 3 other neighbors confirmed they had videos of the same guy breaking into their houses. The The burglar's face went from angry to absolutely terrified because he realized he wasn't just caught for one break-in. He was caught for everything. That's when someone suggested we properly secure him until the police arrived, because what if he somehow escaped the plastic wrap? Julian, still riding high from his watermelon victory, ran to the hardware store 2 blocks away and came back with rope, more duct tape, and for some reason, a bag of zip ties. I tried to be the voice of reason and said, maybe we'd done enough, but Natasha said, no, we need to be thorough, and started reinforcing the plastic wrap with duct tape. They wrapped his torso, then his legs. Then they started adding rope for extra security. Derek suggested they create a cocoon, and everyone agreed that was a great idea. 20 minutes later, this burglar looked like a mummy. Multiple layers of plastic wrap, duct tape, and rope. Just his face exposed, looking absolutely defeated. Someone put a party hat on his head because they thought it was funny. Another person gave him sunglasses. Mrs. Kowalski took another selfie with him, this time holding a "Thanks for coming to our party" sign. The burglar just closed his eyes and accepted his fate. But we still had a problem. The police were taking forever. I'd called 911 30 minutes ago, and they said they were dealing with a major accident and it would be at least another 20 minutes. So we had a captured, mummified burglar at our barbecue, and people were getting bored just standing around. That's when Gavin had his worst idea yet. We should interview him, Gavin announced, like a true crime podcast. Find out why he does what he does. Before I could say that was a terrible idea, Derek was already setting up his phone to record. Julian grabbed a beer and sat down next to the burglar like they were old friends. And Gavin, still holding his spatula, started asking interview questions. So, Kevin, can I call you Kevin? The burglar glared. My name's not Kevin. It is now, Gavin said. Kevin, what made you choose a life of crime? The burglar just stared at him in disbelief. Are you serious right now? I'm calling a lawyer the second the cops get here. Gavin nodded thoughtfully. So you're saying you do have a lawyer? Interesting. That suggests premeditation. The burglar looked like he wanted to cry. The interview went on for 10 minutes, and it was the most absurd thing I've ever witnessed. Gavin asked about his origin story as a criminal. Derek asked about his favorite break-in techniques. Julian asked if he'd ever considered going straight and opening a locksmith business instead. Ashley asked about his diet and whether being a burglar was stressful. The burglar answered exactly 0 questions and just kept demanding a lawyer, but everyone else was having the time of their lives. Mrs. Kowalski asked if he felt bad about stealing her grandmother's jewelry box, and the burglar actually looked guilty for a second before saying, I didn't know it was your grandmother's. She replied, well, it was, and now you've made me sad at my own party. The burglar mumbled, sorry, and everyone lost their minds. He apologized, someone yelled. Character development. People were cheering like we'd just witnessed a redemption arc in real time. The burglar looked utterly confused about why everyone was celebrating his forced apology. Finally, the police arrived. 2 officers walked into my backyard and stopped dead. Officer Ramirez, this older cop with gray hair, just put his hands on his hips and stared at the scene for a solid 10 seconds without saying anything. His partner, Officer Lim, was younger and immediately started fighting a smile. His shoulders were shaking and he had to turn around. Officer Ramirez walked up to the mummified burglar and said, Sir, are you injured? The burglar immediately started yelling, Yes! These people assaulted me. They threw a watermelon at my face. They wrapped me in plastic like a sandwich. This is illegal detention. I want to press charges. Officer Ramirez looked at all of us. Who threw a watermelon? Julian raised his hand proudly. Me, officer. Direct hit. It was beautiful. Officer Lim had to walk away because he was full on laughing now. Officer Ramirez was trying so hard to stay professional, but I could see his mouth twitching. Why did you throw a watermelon? He asked. Julian thought about it. Seemed like the right thing to do in the moment. Officer Ramirez nodded slowly. And the plastic wrap? Natasha stepped forward. Citizens arrest, officer. We secured the suspect. With 3 rolls of plastic wrap. We were being thorough. Officer Ramirez turned back to the burglar. Do you want to file assault charges? The burglar started to say yes, but then Officer Lim came back and said, just so you know, if you file charges, we'll need to investigate whether a watermelon constitutes a weapon, which means preserving it as evidence, which means documenting that you were defeated in combat by fruit. The burglar's face went through several emotions before he finally mumbled, Never mind. Officer Ramirez nodded. Smart choice. Then Mrs. Kowalski showed them her jewelry box that we'd collected from the yard, and Mr. Pacheco showed them his security footage. Officer Ramirez's entire demeanor changed. He radioed for backup and said something about multiple connected burglaries. He looked at the burglar. You're not just in trouble for today, are you? The burglar closed his eyes and shook his head. Officer Lim started unwrapping him, which took forever because Natasha had used so much material. Every layer revealed more charcoal dust and dried watermelon. Officer Lim kept making jokes. Almost there, buddy. You're like a really sad piñata. When they finally freed him and put him in handcuffs, Officer Ramirez read him his rights while Officer Lim talked to us. This is, hands down, the weirdest arrest I've been part of. My sergeant is never going to believe this. He took all our information for statements, and as they walked the burglar to their car, Officer Ramirez turned back and said, For the record, this was the most entertaining citizen's arrest I've seen in 15 years. Completely insane, but it worked. Officer Lim added, I'm putting this in my memoir. As they drove away with the still charcoal-covered burglar in the back seat, I swear I saw Officer Lim taking a selfie with him. The party immediately erupted in celebration. People were high-fiving, retelling the story from their perspectives, and Julian was reenacting his watermelon throw for anyone who'd watch. Mrs. Kowalski gave Gavin, Derek, Felix, and Julian hero burgers with extra everything. Someone made a toast to watermelon justice, and everyone drank. It was the best barbecue I'd ever hosted, and it wasn't even close. The next morning, I woke up to my phone exploding with notifications. Someone had posted the photos online and they'd gone absolutely viral. The image of the plastic-wrapped burglar propped against my fence had millions of views. News outlets were calling. The local news showed up at my house at 8 in the morning asking for interviews. Mrs. Kowalski was already in full makeup ready for her close-up, retelling the story with added embellishments. According to her version now, Gavin had kicked the door off its hinges, and Julian's watermelon throw was like watching an Olympic athlete. None of that happened, but she was committed to her narrative. The news segment aired that evening and made us look like vigilante heroes. The headline was, "Neighborhood Stops Serial Burglar with Barbecue Supplies." We were local celebrities overnight. People recognized us at grocery stores. Restaurants gave us free appetizers. It was surreal. 3 days later, Officer Ramirez called and asked if we could come to the police station. I thought we were in trouble, but when we got there, the entire department wanted to meet us. The police chief shook our hands and said the burglar, whose real name was actually Kevin Strout, had confessed to 14 different break-ins after being arrested. Apparently, being defeated by drunk people with fruit had broken his spirit completely. Captain Morrison said, "We've been trying to catch this guy for 2 months, and you did it with a watermelon and plastic wrap. It's the most ridiculous and effective arrest I've ever seen." Officer Lim had printed the viral photo and hung it in the break room with the caption, "Never underestimate party supplies." They gave us certificates that said, "Honorary Deputy for Exceptional Use of Produce" with official stamps. Gavin framed his immediately. Julian asked if he could get one for the watermelon too. They said no, but they appreciated his dedication. The story kept growing. We got interviewed on podcasts, morning shows, local radio. Every time we told it, people couldn't believe it was real. The most common question was, "Why didn't you just wait for police?" And our answer was always drunk logic. The second most common question was, "Why a watermelon?" And Julian's response became legendary. "It was there, and I trusted my instincts." That quote became a meme in our city. People commented, "Trust your instincts" with watermelon emojis on completely unrelated posts. Local businesses started using it in advertisements. A gym used it as their slogan. Julian was weirdly proud of his accidental philosophical contribution to society. He started signing autographs with "Trust your instincts, Julian," and drawing little watermelons next to his name. He was leaning into his fame hard, and honestly, I respected it. Mrs. Kowalski wrote a book called Grilled Justice, How My Neighbors Saved My Home with a Spatula and a Dream. It was 70% accurate and 30% complete fantasy, but it was entertaining. She had a whole chapter about Gavin's tactical spatula mastery, with diagrams that made zero sense. Another chapter called The Ballistics of Justice analyzed Julian's watermelon throw using fake physics. She dedicated it to heroes everywhere who fight crime with whatever's available. The book sold surprisingly well, and she donated all proceeds to a victims' assistance charity. Say what you want about her embellishments, but Mrs. Kowalski had a good heart. We had a book release party at my house, obviously a barbecue, and she signed copies for everyone while telling the story for the 1,000th time. Each retelling added new impossible details, but nobody corrected her anymore. The legend was more fun than the truth. Kevin got sentenced to 5 years for all the burglaries. His lawyer tried to argue he'd been humiliated enough, but the judge wasn't sympathetic. Officer Ramirez told us Kevin became known as Fruit Guy in prison because he couldn't escape the story. His arrest report literally included the words, "subdued by watermelon," and other inmates never let him forget it. Even in prison, the humiliation followed him. Part of me felt bad. But then I remembered he'd been stealing from elderly people for months. The embarrassment was earned. Our neighborhood changed completely after that. People were friendlier, more connected. We started having regular block parties where everyone brought weird items as potential crime-fighting tools. Someone brought a pineapple. Another person brought a frozen turkey. These gatherings were just excuses to relive that day and laugh together, but they built real community. Crime dropped significantly too, probably because criminals heard about our neighborhood and decided to rob literally anywhere else. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.